What do you say, tubers? It's me. It's the two-eel schmeal. Coming back at you. So listen, I got a little rambling to go off on. I want to talk a little bit, firstly about man's ignorance, then a little bit about the church. Then I'm going to move into a little generalization about views on life and the afterlife, or lack thereof, and the differences between the theistic and the non-theistic views. Well, man's ignorance. Heaven is up and hell is down. Isn't that right? We all know that. We knew that since we were a little kid. Daddy went up to heaven. Uncle Johnny went down to hell. So yeah, we associate good with up and bad with down. What is up with that association? Take two individuals, place them exactly on opposite sides of the earth, and ask both of them to point up. Draw a line from the tip of each person's finger out into space infinitely. You may want to picture the typical drawings of the earth and its axis that goes through the poles, extending out into space. Now look at that picture in your mind from space, from anywhere in space, and you'll see two individuals who are absolutely convinced they're both pointing up. But if seen from space, it's obvious they're pointing in exact opposite directions. And both are correct, of course, in terms of a terrestrial perspective, but from a more objective point of view out in space, the error, it's glaring. We're stuck, I'm afraid, with the primitive idea that associates good things with the heavens and bad things from the underworld. So where did this type of thinking originate? Well, for one, volcanic activity, earthquakes, floods, tsunamis, and the like, all are disasters that come from the rumblings of the underworld. The earth shakes and shit gets destroyed. While sunshine and rain and beautiful clouds are up in the sky, and sunshine and rain, they give life. They help the plants grow. So up is good and down is bad. So it seemed like the angry gods were below us, the ones that caused havoc and destruction, and the good gods were above us, who controlled the movement of the sun and the stars and provided rain, and also indicators of when to plant and harvest. It seems pretty easy to understand why the ancients associated with the heavens as good and the underworld as bad. Of course, once in a while, death came from the sky in the form of lightning and meteors, bad weather and the like, but it was far less often. It was far less brutal, and was offset in people's minds by the fact that the heavens also provided life. So maybe when death came from above, it was because we did something to anger the normally good gods. Of course, any ancient watching a volcano erupting and seeing the hot lava pouring out instantly would know, if given the choice, which direction he'd like to go after death. And it wasn't down. Also, the ancients thought that it was possible that there was no limit to how far down the underworld went. I'm sure that people differed in their opinion, because it looked like the sun went across the sky and then disappeared under the earth and then came back out the other side. So maybe they did think that there was an end to the underworld, but also you have biblical teachings of the bottomless pit that they were going to throw Satan into. So perhaps a lot of people thought maybe there was no limit to the underneath, how far you could go under the world. It was a mystery. It's a mysterious place to the ancients. They had no idea that you could pop out the other side if you dug far enough theoretically through the earth, and then you, instead of going down, would now be going up. So it was a matter of perspective the ancients didn't have. Even today, in the age of the internet, we say the sun comes up and the sun goes down when we know damn well that's not true. Now maybe it's nitpicking, and maybe it's easier to just refer to the sun coming up as opposed to saying, well, the Earth's rotated into position again. And It's probably a practicality, the reason why we say it, but I'm making the point that it's a throwback to a more ignorant age when it was believed that the earth stood still and the sun moved across the sky. That literally meant the sun was coming up to them back then. Now, the sun is moving, but not relative to us. We're moving relative to it. So just as we say the sun comes up, we still say equally ignorant things like we go up to heaven and down to hell. Well, I don't, because I don't believe in those things, so I don't refer to them. But people who do believe in those things still, in their ignorance, say up to heaven and down to hell. Not realizing there is no up and down. It's only relative to a terrestrial experience. So I'd like to ask Christians, exactly where did hell go? Since we know the center of the earth is a solid core of iron and nickel and other heavy metals, and that's surrounded by another layer of magma and then mantle and crust and all these layers, but where's the guy with the pitchfork? Where is God's torture chamber filled with screaming people that didn't accept Jesus? Where'd it go? See, the latest apologist craze is to outright exclaim by decree that hell's not an actual physically tangible place, but that it's a state of mind. It's away from God. It's another pathetic retreat by Christians in the face of incontrovertible evidence that hell is not where they said it was. So in the face of the problem of trying to figure out the location of God's torture chamber, they have taken a nuanced, modern bullshit stance by claiming that, oh, those 1,500 years of saying hell is real and that it's underneath our feet is just a misunderstanding. That was just allegory. Hell's really a state of mind. It's really punishment by being away from God. Is that the best you can do? Huh? Away from God? What happened to Satan and the fire? What happened to eternal torment? Now hell is just away from God? What the fuck kind of shit is that? Is this a new, gentler kind of hell? What is this? Do I get tortured there? Is this a place, a material place? Am I a physical entity? Am I a wispy, ethereal being that has no corporeal matter? What am I? What is hell now? You've defined it out of existence. Before, hell was a real place. Now, it's away from God. You see, folks, it's just like the idea of limbo. The doctrine changes from pressure from the outside and not from within. And this is where I'm going to move into the area of talking about the church. Okay? Remember the Bible said, no man shall come to the Father except through the Son? Well, for years, the official church decree was that if you never heard of Jesus, you went to hell. That if you never had a chance to even hear about the doctrine of Christianity, that because you didn't go to the Father through Jesus, you went to hell through no fault of your own by a geographical accident of where you were born. That includes people from foreign lands and babies too young to accept Jesus. So they sent missionaries far and wide to help save those poor ignorant savages who had no idea that an eternity of fire awaited them. But the babies would just have to get old enough to understand. They couldn't go missionary for a baby. So if the missionaries didn't make it to your village, well, it's just too bad for you. Looks like you're going to burn forever. But hey, we tried, right? At least we alleviated our conscience of the guilt of not bringing the doctrine to anyone. At least we tried to save as many as we could, and then it was their duty to go spread it further to the rest of their people. We got it to you. Now, what you do with it is up to you. We've absolved our guilt. We've washed our hands of the messy situation of people burning forever. But people over time were put off by this notion that someone through just the geographical accident could burn for all eternity through no fault of their own. And so and so it was really frowned upon. So the church gradually backed up on the claim and then said that, well, if you never hear of Jesus, then you get automatic heaven. But if you have been told of Jesus and reject him, then you burn forever. And so people were appeased. They were like, okay, well, that sounds more fair. But then came the question of why minister at all? Why be a missionary at all? You know? If it's true that people who never hear of Jesus get automatic heaven, then why would God want to send Jesus at all? Why would he want people to go missionary at all? Because by giving them a choice, the missionaries were actually bringing into play the possibility of eternal torment. If they just left these natives alone, they would have automatically got heaven. But by going and missionarying them, or whatever the hell, by proselytizing, they actually jeopardize their souls, and which I mistakenly got to a little bit early, which makes you wonder why Jesus was sent at all. God must want people to go to hell because he's given them the choice now. If people didn't hear about Jesus, then according to the church, they get automatic heaven. So why would God even send Jesus? And furthermore, why would God even put us here on earth at all? Just create us in heaven to begin with. That way, guarantee none of us would all be sinners and we'd all be in heaven. And why not kill Satan? Well, I could just go on forever, but it's just too easy. But there are more important points to be made out of this fiction that we call Christianity, so I digress. Meanwhile, this doctrine on babies was the same, that they would just go to hell if they never, if they died in infancy, never having taken Jesus. But mothers started getting pissed off with the thought that their baby would go to hell and burn forever. They just couldn't bear the thought of their son or daughter roasting on Satan's spit. So, of course, the doctrine of babies in hell became unpopular, to say the least, and forced the church to do something. And what did they do? They invented limbo. It was a sort of morbid, curious compromise where they didn't say that babies would get to heaven because, they couldn't say that the babies could get to heaven without Jesus, because if they did that, then other people would get the idea that maybe I don't need Jesus for salvation. And from there, it's only a short step to assume that if I don't need Jesus for salvation to get to the Father, then perhaps I don't even need the church and I can get to the Father on my own independently. Who needs the church? That would undermine the necessity of the power of the leaders of Christianity. At the same time, they couldn't have grieving mothers agonizing over visions of Satan basting their baby with barbecue sauce. So they came up with limbo, so as to appease the parents and not piss off the fundamental element that thought it should stay the way it is. That's what you call politics, not the word of God. So now what's the latest? Well, it turns out that parents don't like the idea of limbo either. It's a midway point between heaven and hell where babies' souls go to wander aimlessly in some imagined void. Once again, faced with pressure from the outside, the church changed its doctrine, caved, and totally removed the idea of limbo. Just completely washed their hands and said, oh, limbo doesn't exist. Just as quickly as they invented it, they abandoned it. What will they come out and say is not real next? I think it's going to be hell. It's obvious there's no hell because it's supposed to be under our feet. It's not. In this modern age, you can't go around trying to convince people that there's a guy with a pitchfork torturing people to death and he lives under our feet inside the earth. A modern sense of science will tell you in 2 seconds the place doesn't exist. So in my opinion, the church is going to have to back off the doctrine of hell. Number one, it's brutal, it's horrible, it's not cogent with our modern sense of morality. And so I think that they're going to have to get rid of it. But it won't disappear entirely because the church still needs something to scare the bejesus out of the little 7-year-olds. So what they'll do is transform hell into a kinder, general, federal prison-esque country club of a place where you spend eternity, But instead of fiery torture and the guy with the pitchfork, your main punishment is just going to be being away from God. And it's already starting. We can see how the apologists twist and squirm in the light of the modern age. Increasingly, they're being pushed into an ever-shrinking corner of discussion. No more can religion say how the heavens go. No more can religion say why natural disasters happen. That is now the domain of science. Religion has less and less to say as science discovers more and more. Religion evolves, yes, but not on its own. An organism with no environmental pressure will not undergo great physiological changes because it has no need to adapt. Right, take a look at the crocodile. It's had no outside pressure. It's had no pressure to adapt. Thus, it still has the same physiological shape it had millions of years ago. Other creatures have changed a bunch. But when there's no pressure from the environment, the organism will not evolve. If religion and the church is the organism, and people's sense of morality is the environment, and the pressure that we bring upon the church in rejection to their doctrines, we are forcing that organism to adapt and change or die. We've forced environmental pressure on the organism of religion, and it has evolved. For an organization that doesn't believe in evolution, it is kind of ironic. So, now that the environment is bringing pressure on this organism, or perhaps mental virus we call religion, it's forced to adapt. When the people or the environment no longer believe the claims of the church, the organism, because they have actual science now, they bring pressure in the form of protest and riots, uprisings and rebellions. And to avoid all this, the church is forced to change. See, they're smart. They haven't been in business for a long time by accident. No longer does it use thumbscrews to convince people its doctrine is true. No longer does it set people ablaze for professing other beliefs. And why? Because people no longer tolerate it. Period. Left to their own devices, the church would be just as ruthless today as it was way back when. Look at Christianity today compared to the height of its power. Look at the way it's lost its power to control the people with fear and power. They used to demand you believe or you'll be put to death. Now they're begging and pleading for new recruits as its members are depleting, especially here in the West. Whereas before they would kick your door in and drag you out to be hung, now they come to your door hat in hand, pathetically begging you to join their once brutal cult. And that is a testament to knowledge. That is a testament to progress. That is a testament to enlightenment. The church represents ignorance and backwardness, while the enlightenment of people unleashed a distaste and resentment for such ignorance and represents progress. It's easy to see why ancients would have such simple concepts of heaven being up and hell being down, but for us, there's no excuse. It's a minor beef, but is a powerful clue to the ignorance that still lies just beneath the surface of our so-called modern brain. Wow, up to heaven and down to hell. That's man's ignorance in a nutshell. As Christopher Hitchens so eloquently pointed out on numerous occasions, it's obvious that the leaders of Christianity who, while extolling the perfection and greatness of the afterlife and God's kingdom, and debasing this life as only a test on a fallen world, are really jockeying for power and wealth in this world. If this life is unimportant, then why do you value power and riches? If this life is nothing and the afterlife is so great, then why are you not in a rush to get to heaven? Why spend another day on this dusty-ass death planet when the perfection of heaven awaits you? Do they really believe? The leaders of Christianity? When you look at the way they live in this life and you see what they value, do they really believe with their actions? Why do you grieve when someone dies? Shouldn't you be happy that they left this fallen, miserable world of sin, controlled by Satan, and went to paradise? Isn't that a good thing? Or is it that deep down inside we grieve, and they grieve, because we and they know we will never see that person again? Is it because the truth is so painful that we must lie to ourselves like little frightened children so as to put the boogeyman at bay? Perhaps our penchant and desire for comfort reveals an intrinsic insecurity and uncertainty in humanity, masquerading as bravado and truth. Perhaps instead of looking at death's finality as a completely bleak and pessimistic point of view, we could turn that on its head and make it something wonderful. And now I'm going to move into my views on the afterlife. It goes like this, and how we can make this view of death being final not a pessimistic thing, but a beautiful thing. When I was a Christian, I thought I would live forever. There was less value on this life. I was taught to believe it's only a test, and the real prize is heaven. I looked at my life as just this first short chapter of a never-ending story where the best chapters are yet to be written, and they're going to happen in heaven. There was no urgency to spend time with my friends more than usual, because if I missed any time with them, I'll have all eternity to make up for it. No rush. What's the big deal? Besides, heaven's way better anyway. At the time, that was a reassuring and comforting thought, and I never saw how it actually devalued my value of this life. In the economics of supply and demand, the less you have of something, the more it's worth. And the more you have of something, the less it's worth. Based on that theory, if you have an infinite supply of something, it's worthless. Well, eternal life is an infinite supply of time. It never ends. One moment's just as guaranteed to happen as the next. It's the brevity of life that gives it its value. You can't value something that you have an infinite amount of. But if you only have a small amount of something, its value shoots through the roof. Even better yet, if you have something that's unique or one of a kind, it's priceless. No value can be put on it because it can't be compared against anything. Likewise, when I thought that I had an infinite amount of life, this life became unimportant except as to prove my worthiness to God. But now that I think this life is finite and death is final, my life is all of a sudden priceless. We're all unique, one of a kind, irreplaceable creatures, and therefore are priceless. Now I realize my time is fleeting. Now I realize that life is precious. At first the thought scared me, but then I realized I had actually gained a valuable perspective. No longer was I a lowly, groveling sinner on a fallen world controlled by Satan. I became an irreplaceable, priceless member of the eternal cosmos. I am the universe made conscious. We are the universe trying to understand itself. To take it a bit further, the matter from which my body is composed is perhaps eternal and will continue forever in one form or another. And to me, that's a poetic thought that religion could never provide, which only adds to the beauty and mystery of this inexplicable, irreplaceable, priceless existence we call life. So people, don't buy into the idea that if you don't believe in the afterlife, that you're a pessimist. Actually, the knowledge that we'll die should be the fuel that ignites an infinite appreciation for every day. By not believing in an afterlife, you don't lose anything or give something up. You gain something. You gain perspective and appreciation that you wouldn't have had otherwise. Far from being a negative, pessimistic view on life, knowledge of death's finality can actually give us a grander appreciation for the fleeting moments we actually have. People who go through near-death experiences have this new appreciation. They've been close to death. They now value the time they have infinitely more. Can't we have this appreciation without the near-death experience? They look at people who came near death. They're not scared anymore. They've been there. There's nothing to fear, they now realize, and that's why people who've had near-death experiences are some of the most fun-loving, carefree people you want to meet, who just want to enjoy whatever of life they have left. With that new-found appreciation that only comes through the knowledge that death is final. You can't appreciate something until it's gone. Well, I don't need to die to know the value of this life. It's all we have. So let's not spend our fleeting time cowering in fear of the unknown. When we get there, we may find it's not as bad as the church would like us to believe. Be brave. Accept the fact that death is final and you will benefit. It's a trade-off. If you think you live forever, then your life is worthless. If you think when you die, that's it, your life has infinite value. But if you want to have infinite value attributed to your life, you must sacrifice the notion of an afterlife, which is no sacrifice at all because it doesn't exist anyway. What have you sacrificed? Nothing. What have you gained? Perspective, appreciation, value, and worth, comfort and peace of mind, true comfort and true peace of mind. Once we slowly let go of the fear of dying, then we can finally begin to live. I'm not saying it's easy. This type of thought process is uncomfortable for many, and it takes a strong person who values truth over what feels good. But it can be the most rewarding change of attitude you can ever get in life.